I'd like to start by saying welcome, everybody. My name is Lisa Dickson. I am the head of Kent Law School and reader in law. And my area of law, and one of the reasons I'm talking to you today, is about I'm interested in cyber law, the way that data is used, which up until a few years ago was just fairly geeky law, but now I'm it's my moment, seize my moment. So yes, I'm Lisa, and together with Kerin. Marie, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, so hi everybody, I'm Marie. I'm the Director of Education at Kent Law School, which basically means that I am responsible for making sure that everybody has a good experience when they join us for their studies. So it's a pleasure to see you all here. In terms of my background and my interest, apart from being super interested in education, as the title might show, I'm really interested in legal ethics, and that is an area that I specialize in terms of my teaching. And so, with uh, the burgeoning sphere that is all things AI, we are encountering a lot of issues as well as opportunities about how we can use and harness AI, both in legal education and also in the legal sector, which is something that we're going to be thinking about today. And that's something that I'm really interested in terms of how we can do this stuff right.
So, in fact, thinking about the plan for today's session, what we wanted to talk to you about is basically our crossover interest and where we come together in sort of legal education and ethics, um, is to look at what AI is and how it's been or thinking about what it actually is and how it impacts within a legal context, and look about or start thinking about, because for you at the beginning of your legal law degrees and potential legal careers, let's think about the future of the legal professions and how AI is going to impact that, and how you, as students coming in through legal education, can make an impact through the way in which you study and how you develop your interests. So, what we want to look at is the sort of AI in law and specifically in legal education. We're going to be talking today about a lot of skills, and obviously, Marie and I will be framing them within a legal context and looking at sort of legal questions. But when you think about sort of skills within AI and skills within critical legal education, it's just worth flagging just before we start that all of these skills are sort of transferable. All of these ideas and concepts that we're talking about today transfer beyond the sort of the legal landscape into anything that you go on to do. So I just wanted to make that sort of point now, because we will start sort of focusing in on the law. So what we wanted to do today, because we like to be interactive even though we can't we can't see you, it's weird for us, is to start by saying, okay, let's start with a Vivox poll and think about what you know about or what you think about AI. The reason we're starting with this, and I'm going to hand over to Marie in a second to lead on the Vivox poll, but one of the things is that the vast majority of you, again, I can't see you, but the vast majority of you, you will be Gen Z. And the way your digital natives, the way you think about AI is probably very different to, Gen X, the way I think about AI. And I won't age Marie by putting her in the Gen X box. I will call you millennial, Marie. But that sort of idea about the way in which we approach AI, the way in which we approach technology, and how we think about how we ought to use it, may in fact turn out to be very different. So it's always really, really important, particularly in thinking about tech and ethics and AI, in looking at different ideas and how different people approach it. So this is the Vivox session. You can use, oh, I've gone backwards, sorry. The poll is now open. Let me go back to here. If you can join the Vivox, use the QR code. There's the session. Give people a second to do that. And you should be able to see the first question, which is, what is AI and how have you used it? You will need to use short answers. It's going to generate a word cloud for us, which means that you need to be thinking about sort of just very short answers. You can use more than one answer. So you could, how have you used it? Plan holidays, answer questions. Or, if you've been reading the news currently, sort of developing an AI boyfriend or girlfriend, which Elon Musk has set out for 12-year-olds. So let's so people just put in as many as you can. Is that can I just check that's working for you? Can somebody put it in the chat for Marie?
Does look like it's working. It looks like we've got a few people who have already started submitting, so that's fantastic. It will need to be short word answers, but feel free to put in as many answers as you want to, the more the merrier. So it's about how you've used it, but also what you think it is, and that is something that we want to make sure that we've got our heads around.
Just give that a few seconds. Marie, I can't see that because I've got this things open. Can you, when you think there's some there, just give me, if you say, and I can flick on to the generating.
Yeah, so it looks like we've still got a few more people to go, and so if we just give that like 15 more seconds, and people just feel free to put your thoughts down, and then we can close things. And yes, of course, you can put your answer in the chat. I'm monitoring that as we go along.
Oh, there, it's come up on my screen now. Oh, a couple of people come out the poll there. No, I'm not putting my words in. Right, let's give it a shall I? I'm going to go
Perfect.
for
Let's
it.
go. That's all good.
Right, it is preparing the results. Let's see what they come out with. It's become the new planner.
It
That's
really
really interesting.
has.
Yeah, isn't that really?
I've seen so much of that online of people using things to plan, people using things to cook recipes and to be more efficient with their recipes. So this is what I've got in my fridge. Now give me some fantastic recipes for it. What else do we have? Essay planning, used it for advice, holidays. Is it replacing Google, I wonder? We've got a few things here around search engines and using it as a fast way to get some answers. Homework information, um,
Drafting up
explaining
plan.
concepts,
I really like
idea
the one at the
generation.
bottom. Help weigh up your options, helping you choose which way to go.
Yeah, yeah. And also really interestingly, we've got somebody here who says that it's making us lazy. And I think that that is something that is really at the forefront of some of the discussions that we're having in education. That are we transferring our minds' capabilities in doing this? We've got some answers in the chat too. So we've got somebody who has said that they've used it in with regards to their neurodiversity and their legal rights through a UK safeguarding lens, which sounds super interesting and important. And somebody's also said that last night they got AI to use a schematic as to hierarchy of legal duty through a care lens in local council. So very much looking at a variety of really important and very disparate ways of doing it. One of the things that I think is really interesting, and this is something that Lisa is going to come on to talk about though, is we've not really focused here in our answers on what AI is beyond that idea of artificial intelligence. And actually, that's something that we really need to get clear in our minds because we don't want AI to be mistaken just for ChatGPT. So over to you, Lisa.
And just finally on that, it's quite interesting that all of these words are all the same size except for planning, because everybody's using it as a planning tool. And then we have all of these different sort of disparate uses beyond planning, which I think is really, really interesting. It shows us that people are using it for so many different things because it is becoming almost ubiquitous. It's in Siri. It's, you know, when you do a Google search now, AI is, you get that AI summary at the top, don't you? So what is AI? How does it actually work? And what are we asking it to do? So let's just start with what AI is, understanding the basics. I wanted to start with this rather than sort of give examples of here are different uses of AI. What I thought would be useful is to say, well, what is it? How, what's real now and where are we going in the future? Because you're about to start on your law degrees and you're about to sort of start thinking about how the law works, how we're developing as a society. So it's worth thinking about where we are now and where we're going with AI. And if you were trying to sort of sum up what AI is, rather than just sort of chat GPT or Claude or, Copilot, whatever you go to, it's all generative AI, these kinds of things that people use as an example, is to actually think, well, what is it and what is it? How is it developing? AI at a basic level is just an algorithm, and it's what when computers or technology is designed to do something or to do things that normally need human thinking or human engagement with, like answering questions or recognizing images or designing, people talking about, altering photographs, designing things, or making decisions, weighing up the options, these kinds of things. So artificial intelligence, and it's in, AI, it's in the name, intelligence. It's when computers or technology is designed to do, or the algorithms are designed to do things that usually need human thinking. And the way in which AI works is by learning from huge amounts of data. We've all heard, or you will have heard in the news about the amount of data or the amount of energy it takes to use AI. So, people sort of talking about, if you're asking ChatGPT something, that's killing off a quarter of the rainforest, or we're starting to see massive sort of questions about the impact on climate of AI, these kinds of things, because AI works from a huge amount of data. And what it's doing is spotting patterns and predicting what to do or how to answer next. That's what AI is doing at essence. The way it does it now, at sort of the left of your screen, is what we call narrow AI. It's the sort of the reactive AI, the kind of things like chatbots, spam filters, your Spotify recommendations. You have listened to artist A, B, and C, and I'm not going to age myself by naming artists there, or try and sound cool with somebody I don't know. So, you've listened to X, Y, and Z on Spotify. And so therefore, because what the AI will do is say is think. See, we talk about it in human terms. Is think, okay, people that listen to that artist also like this artist. They tend to listen to that, and it uses the data that it has to spot a pattern, and that's how it makes a recommendation. It's the same with sort of, it's slightly more advanced, your generative AI tools, ChatGPT, Claude, Copilot, self-driving cars, and these virtual assistants. What they're actually doing is doing it by using a limited amount of memory. It knows something about you, or it knows, in your chat with your ChatGPT, it knows where you're developing. It uses a limited amount of memory to make these decisions. The As we move forward into more sort of the realm currently of concept or sci-fi or that kind of thing, what we're looking at is theory of mind and ultimately self-aware AI. The theory of mind AI is this idea that AI, the algorithms, would understand more, understand emotions, intentions, and social context. AI is currently just predicting from its large amount of data. So the theory of mind, not yet real, it only exists in theory and in very advanced research where they're starting to get the AI to develop beyond just the original algorithms. And then self-aware AI, this is sort of evolved with its own self-awareness and can mimic emotion, these kinds of things. For now, that is just science fiction. It's not actually in existence. But why is that important? Why am I breaking it up in this way? Well, understanding the types of AI and where we are and how we're moving is important because it helps you recognize or start out by understanding that not all AI, we hear artificial intelligence and you think, not all AI is as advanced or intelligent as it necessarily seems. Most AI that we're using today and that we as consumers use, rather than sort of research and advanced labs and technology there, and most of it's narrow. It's good for one particular task. ChatGPT, you ask it questions or you ask it to generate things, that kind of thing. It's not truly intelligent in that way. It just does one particular thing. This means it helps you when you start thinking like this and recognizing that there is a narrowness to AI. It helps you spot when the tech is just sounding intelligent versus recognizing that it doesn't actually understand, it's just predicting. And this is a really useful tool or useful recognition, particularly for lawyers. Just because something sounds confident, be it ChatGPT or another person, doesn't mean it's right. It is literally just using an algorithm, in this case, in ChatGPT, to predict. You will be using, understanding this basics, this idea of sort of very narrow AI and it evolving over time to start becoming more than its original algorithm. Um, these tools at the narrow end at the moment will appear in research, they'll appear in essay planning, they'll appear in how you come to your studies, and also future jobs. And if you know what AI can do, and equally what it can't do, that helps you to use it properly as a tool and also ethically. There's a difference between using AI to brainstorm something and, at the other end of the spectrum, letting it do your thinking for you. Somebody said in the chat earlier, it's making us lazy. And you know what? It is. I mean, I probably use AI for things I really ought not to, ask questions that really, if I just engaged brain, I could do it better myself. But there is a real difference to using it to brainstorm and to letting it do your thinking and being able to use it properly and ethically. So understanding what AI can do and what it can't do is really important. You will have a better understanding if you can understand AI and master how to use it. You'll have a better understanding of when a human touch or when human critical thinking skills are needed. It helps you understand what you do better than AI because there's so much roles involving emotion, roles involving ethics, as Marie said at the beginning, creativity or judgment, these sorts of things. That's not what AI does well. Um, Spotify will suggest music, but it really can't actually write your dissertation for you such that you can pass a liver on it, that kind of thing. And as I said, theory of mind and self-aware AI, that strong AI, doesn't yet exist, but someone will build it eventually. Someone will build this, and understanding the difference, understanding what needs to be thought through in terms of regulation, in terms of policy, in terms of ethics, morality, who we are as a society. Currently, I was at the House of Commons a couple of weeks ago with MPs looking at policy decisions on what AI training and education and skills should go into the national curriculum going forward for kids going in primary school and going into secondary. Does that make them lazy? Do we want them to understand the substantives first? These kinds of things. If you understand where we are and understand what AI does and what it doesn't do, it helps you join the debate. It helps you influence the debate and policy, and it helps you innovate in an area where you understand. Whether it's in law, science, art, business, you as the next generation coming through on the cusp of this sort of massive explosion of AI, you are able, if you understand it, to help define the AI's future in society. So that's why I wanted to sort of explain the basics in terms of where we are and where we're going with the sort of limited kind of narrow AI moving into AI that begins to start mimicking and understanding context and emotion. Today, I think we'll focus on the one, because it'll become relevant to the legal profession and legal skills, is to think about Gen AI, really, because that's where we start, and what Gen AI actually is. Because people sort of think about Gen AI, you put in a question and it comes out with an answer or a paragraph, or helps you make decisions or weigh up your options or plan an essay or help with your EPQ research. I saw on the word cloud earlier. I've got my son's just doing A levels. So what is Gen AI? Again, if you understand what it is, then it helps you understand what you need to be looking for in the answers and how to evaluate them and critically engage with them. So one of the easiest ways to explain generative AI, so I've just put up some of them there, GPT, Copilot, Claude, is through the neural network diagram. I think this at the moment looks sort of like a little bunch of blobs, but I think it helps sort of understand it. So the input layer is you give it a prompt. You prompt the AI, you ask a question. You type something, let's use the example, explain what negligence means in law. Each one of those purple blobs would be a word. So, negligence in law, right? So you put in the question, explain what negligence means in law. That's your input or your question or your instruction or your topic that you want to put in. Then it goes through the hidden layers, this neural network. And this is where you might have heard referred to the large language models, the way in which generative AI processes your answer. So what happens is that each of those words will go in, and the Gen AI is trained on, as I've said, huge libraries of data, books, websites, essays, blogs, in our instances, legal cases, even Reddit, these sorts of things. It has access to everything. Each layer, so each of these sort of vertical strands of blue there, each layer, what it does is it finds patterns in the language. What words usually come next? It's like, on your phone, if you've got predictive text turned on, I myself have turned it off because it is just hateful. But predictive text, this is almost predictive text on super steroids. What the patterning does is and it depends on how advanced your platform is. So, that is as to how many layers it will go through. And the more layers it goes through, the more complex or the more nuanced, I suppose, the answer is. So, what it's doing is looking for patterns. What word should come next, or how to generate this picture? What should it look like? It doesn't understand like a human, it just predicts what comes next. And the reason it does it so well is that there are millions of calculations happening in every second, where the platform, the GPT, Claude, actually predicts what a good answer would look like. And the more calculations it makes, the more complex the layers are, and the more layers it goes through, the bigger the library that it's using, the more complex or sophisticated, I suppose, the answer sounds. And so for my input, I said, my input layer, explain what negligence means in law. It goes through the blue section, the hidden layers, and it'll come out with something like, because here's one I prepared earlier. I did this earlier, and I got the answer: negligence in law refers to a failure to take reasonable care resulting in damage or injury to another person. Cool. It's a fairly good answer. It sounds and it feels intelligent, but it's really just advanced word prediction based on patterns it has seen before. What this means is that at the moment, with this narrow AI, with ChatGPT, it what it doesn't do is it doesn't know, it doesn't understand whether its answer is true, whether it's right, whether there's a context that you've given. It doesn't understand the meaning of law. It's not ascribing any value to its answer of, negligence in law refers to failure to take reasonable care. It doesn't understand the ethics of law or the societal impact or value, or why a law changes over time because society changes. It simply mimics how people talk and how people write. It's getting very, very good at it, very good indeed. But it isn't the same as understanding. This matters because it is mimicking intelligence, but it's not conscious, it's not human, it's not critically engaging. And what this means for you in practical real terms is that if you're using it in legal study or in legal work, you need to critique and verify everything it outputs. And that's why, when you look at it, yeah, often it'll be right, but often it'll miss the nuance. And particularly in law, in thinking about Gen AI, law changes and cases change, and the understanding of how the law works through cases and through legal judgments, that's an incredibly nuanced thing. Understanding what the judges are saying or the words that they use really matter. And it's on this understanding that sometimes entire legal precedent changes because someone makes an argument in another case to say, yes, it was used like that there, but we can distinguish it because and something small. Or they'll try a desperate argument and think, let's go with this. GPT won't do that. Claude won't do that. It'll mimic it, but it doesn't do that because it is predicting based on what it already knows. So in thinking about that, we can move to the idea of AI and the law. What comes to mind now in thinking about AI and the law? Not what I've tried to explain there is a sort of a very basic, rough pencil sketch of what AI is, and particularly generative AI, so that we can then now start thinking of, okay, well, what comes to mind for you when you hear the phrase AI and law? Anything. You go for it. Let's see. What would people like to put in? Sorry, Marie, I've been chumbling. You're on mute.
Yeah, I think that was on a timer, Lisa. It's gone off.
Oh,
You need to send it backwards. He
what's
allowed
on the
one
timer?
word.
Oh, right.
Um,
Sorry. Is that it? Oh,
it's got a 30-second timer on it. So people be quick. Um,
God,
and whilst you're doing it, and I think that this is fine, and it's good to be at pace. A couple of comments have come up in the chat, and I think sometimes these chat comments aren't to everybody; they're just to us. So some people might not see them. But one person talked a lot about having in trying to understand the inherent bias that might be there with things like ChatGPT, because they can seem so positive and like yes men and very polite and very like, aren't you wonderful? And I think that Lisa has touched upon a lot of this stuff in terms of thinking about training data. And it's interesting to note that a lot of the training data now, not always the case, but nowadays, is considered a bit of a trade secret, and they don't always share this information. So you're actually using tools that you don't know what that training data is. And so you wouldn't necessarily know the kinds of things that it is used to train with. And there's also a difference between a Gen AI platform that is connected to the internet and not connected to the internet. So there's lots of things that we can be thinking about. And somebody has also thanked you, Lisa, for letting them know that you can actually turn predictive text off, because they didn't know that. And I think that that's really important in terms of just how embedded and so quickly this kind of thing has become. So, for example, if you use Microsoft Word nowadays, predictive text of what you're literally writing your essays, and it's telling you what to write. It's built in. You have to turn it off. So these kinds of things, I think, we just need to be thinking about and being alert to. And obviously, there is, as I'm sure that you can tell, so much that we could cover, but there is time that is limited, and so I think it's really important to move on to this law aspect now as well. Otherwise, we'll get caught up in that bias question. But it's a really good one to raise. Thank you.
and in thinking about it, that's something that you can study in law. I mean, one of the things that I deal with on one of my modules is facial recognition technology and facial rec cameras, because of course the bias from the training data, originally all facial rec technology was trained on basically young white men. That's the photos. And so when it came to recognizing accurately men between sort of 20, 30 who were white, really high accuracy rate. But if you went and particularly, it was around about 80, 90%. But if you tried to match the face of particularly South Asian women, the accuracy rate was down at 4%. So it is that inherent bias when you don't understand what the training data is. But yeah, that's a whole nother module and beyond today.
Absolutely.
So
So I love the range here. We've got fake case law. I'm going to come on to that in just a moment. Bureaucracy, generation, wrong answers, wrong information, perfected answers. So we've got the polarization there. We've got fake cases again, efficient error. So we've got a lot of this idea about like is it right? And I think that leads really nicely onto the next slide in thinking about um, honing in on AI and the law. So what we are thinking about here is AI came about in, well, generative AI as we understand it now came about only 3 years ago now. And already a huge amount of change has changed in this space. And law firms, amongst with any other kind of firm that you can think of, as well as establishments like universities, have had to respond very quickly in a very changing environment. So if you think about it, when universities started to respond to AI, anything that ChatGPT was putting out wasn't fantastic, and a year later, suddenly it's pretty darn good. And so we're having to very rapidly grapple with this kind of thing, and so the firms are too. And so you've got a range of different viewpoints, and if we take law firms for an example, Shoesmiths, which is one of the big London firms, are offering a £1 million bonus pot this year to encourage AI use amongst staff. They are actively encouraging their staff to use generative AI platforms down to the amount of prompts that they are asking them to use per day. And it's something like, if everybody used 4 prompts a day, then they would meet their target and they would get this £1 million bonus pot unlocked. So you've got some firms that are really upping this. I was at an event the other day with a local Kent firm, and they had real concerns about using AI full stop for any of the work that they're going to do. Why? Because it rapidly improves productivity of staff. So imagine I'm writing a contract and it takes me 4 hours to write this contract. Well, I'm going to bill you for 4 hours of time, right? But if I am using a generative AI platform and suddenly that 4 hour contract is down to 1 hour because I'm using a tool to increase my productivity there, what do I do about my billables? Now, I'm not going to go into the way in which law firms manage this kind of thing, but this is the kind of thing that they're having to respond to, right? And so, I mentioned I'm interested in ethics. That is one of the big areas of transparency that firms are having to hit head on. We are increasing our productivity. What does this mean in terms of how we bill our clients? So they're until they sort that out, they're not touching it. They need to have new policies and procedures in place to make that work for them. And on the other hand, we had a lot of people there in various different ways saying they've heard on the news that there are fake case issues, right? And that is because some both clients, and the article that I've linked to you here details issues of both a barrister, so a lawyer, and a client of a lawyer who didn't check, generated fake cases without realizing it and used them in the courts. Now, as I'm sure that you can imagine, that is a hugely problematic thing when we are thinking about deciding cases and making sure that legal decisions are dealt with correctly. So there are a lot of different issues and responses to AI in terms of how law firms and the legal sector more broadly are operating with these things. And the High Court is taking a very firm line that it is not okay to do this. It is considered to be contempt of court. So if I could move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So in terms of the different ways in which AI is being used, I've talked a little bit about some of it. Other examples here are that Freshfields, powered by Google Gemini, has AI embedded for all 5,700 members of staff. They use it daily for research and drafting and compliance. We've got different kinds of tasks that lawyers might be using, and they are detailed here on the left-hand side of the slides and to talk you through them. Things like document review, things like legal research, things like document summarization, very, very high usage of where it is being used. So not everybody in law firms at this moment in time is using generative AI, but we're certainly moving in that direction, and these are the kinds of tasks. Now, interestingly, somebody in the chat earlier said that they were very concerned about data privacy and compliance and that kind of thing. And that certainly is an important aspect of this. So a lot of lawyers, they're not going to be just using ChatGPT, they're going to be using secure platforms for their firms that allow them to use certain things. So if I give you an example, I teach on a legal professional practice course at KLS for our M-Law in solicitors practice, where we train and support students to get ready for the solicitors qualifying examination. And at Kent Law School, we really think it's important that students start to work with and to understand how to use AI. So we use it in the classroom. And so one day I gave my students importantly, fake bundle of papers for a court case. And I said to them, I want you to use ChatGPT or whatever platform that you want to use to get your brief ready. Okay, I'm only going to give you half an hour. You've got this big bundle. What are you going to do? And we can talk about that. Every single one of those students input the entire bundle into ChatGPT without a second thought, right? And one of the key issues with that, and you can see Lisa looking horrified on the screen, is that is a massive breach of client confidentiality, because you are putting information about people, their names, their data, into something without checking it at all. And so there are huge implications for how we work with this stuff. And part of the issue as well is, as somebody has mentioned today, ChatGPT and Claude in particular, I'm a big fan of Claude, they are very friendly and you feel like you're chatting to a mate. And so it's very easy to get lulled into a false sense of security and to provide it with more information than it is appropriate to do. So this is another area that we need to be thinking about when we're thinking about how AI can be used in law. And then finally, before I move on from this slide, Garfield AI is a very, very interesting product that has just been launched in the UK, and it is essentially the first regulated solicitor's practice almost. It's the regulated lawyer chatbot, sorry, for generative AI. So it is the first Gen AI, a bit like ChatGPT, specific for legal cases, regulated by Solicitors Regulatory Authority. The reason why I stumbled over my words there is because, and again, there's too much to talk about and to unpack there, I'm not sure that I would call it a Gen AI lawyer. And the reason why I wouldn't call it a Gen AI lawyer is because a key part of lawyering is providing clients with advice. Now, if you look at Garfield, and I would encourage you to do so, one thing that Garfield categorically doesn't do is provide advice. And that is something that is a key lawyering skill that we need to be thinking about when we go on later in today's session to think about culpability and who can take ownership of answers to things. So if we can move on, because I'm conscious of that time there. Very briefly, Sir Geoffrey Voss, who is the Master of the Rolls and Head of Civil Justice in England and Wales, i.e. a very important person in the legal field in England and Wales, said very recently, back in February, that silly examples of bad practice should not put lawyers off AI. What he is saying here, and it's a very interesting concept when we're thinking about the future of the legal profession and indeed your place in it, that one of the key areas of activity in the years to come is likely to be claims of to be brought over negligent or inappropriate use of AI, and really interestingly, the negligent or inappropriate failure to use AI. And one of the things that he is saying here is that in the legal sector, we are often serving businesses and consumers, and those businesses and consumers are using AI. So it is not an appropriate response to say we're not going to use AI because it is too dangerous and we can't work with it, when our clients are doing the same thing and when we need to support them in doing the same thing and provide them in legal advice and guidance. So we need lawyers who are, and I quote, adept at the understanding the capabilities and weaknesses of generative AI. And if we don't have them, I quote again, they will not be able to advise their clients properly about the issues that will undoubtedly arise from its applications. I'll hand back to you, Lisa.
So, taking from that, and this is a quote from a number of articles. Incidentally, we are going to get the slides sent out to you because in the notes section of the slides, we put links to everything that we have created, where we've got them from, so that you can find them if you're interested. Is that AI, the ideas or the position that's taken, and this, Sir Geoffrey Voss agrees with this, is that AI won't replace lawyers, but lawyers using AI responsibly, strategically, are already outperforming those who don't. So that leads us into sort of away from the kind of what is AI into what's happening within AI in the law to what does that mean for legal education? And just very briefly, because I think it's probably really good for you to start thinking about some of the questions, is what does this mean for what it is you need to be thinking about? Well, at KLS we have a critical law school anyway, which you should be aware of. In other words, we're not just teaching you what the law is, but how the law fits within a wider context, teaching you to ask questions, which, as it happens, something we've done since the inception of KLS, but works beautifully well within an AI legal landscape. So what I've done is sort of put these boxes. The blue boxes are basically sort of your critical thinking and judgment that you would learn anyway. So starting out, you will and you ought to still be as law students studying the substantive foundations of legal knowledge. So things like contract law, criminal law, European law, the foundations of legal knowledge. But you need to be thinking critically about them. So that this is about your ability to start spotting the weak arguments, to challenge the bias, to think ethically. These making strong ethical judgments and advice, and picking out what's working well and what isn't working well. That idea of systems thinking, that law, and this is something that's absolutely fundamental to a critical law school, law doesn't exist in a bubble. We're not just going to teach you what it is. You need to understand how legal problems link to, we've always talked about it in terms of linking within culture, society, more recently climate, social justice, and now also with technology. Looking at the orange boxes, this I think is that next stage in developing law and understanding law in an AI context, is that you need to start developing skills that you didn't even know you needed sort of even a couple of years ago, understanding how the tools work so that you're able to pick out where the weak arguments are. You can't evaluate how good an answer is if you don't understand the substantive law and understand where you need to be persuading or what could be pulled apart or where the weakness is. You need to be able to challenge what AI is producing and start navigating a whole new genre of real world ethical legal questions that we'll go on to in a moment. If AI is writing the answer, who owns it? Can you trust an algorithm to make sentencing decisions? These sorts of things. But equally within that, also going on to the right hand side of my boxes there, and my current favorite purple, um, I like a lot of color. The sorts of ideas, the not soft skills, or the more experiential sort of communication skills that you need, making complex ideas, making them make sense, being confident and clear in your communication, and communicating to the audience you're speaking to. It's no good being able to understand law, understand complicated legal context or concepts, if you can't explain that to lay people, to somebody, to a chatbot, to a judge. Being able to adapt how you explain things, making law make sense. This is something that we saw at the beginning, we're still at the narrow AI end, and we need to be thinking in terms of policy, development, regulation, ethics, about how we work with AI and what the human touch brings in terms of empathy, being able to advise clients, being able, sorry, I'm just trying to close all my things down, the communication that you need and that colleagues need going forward, your ability to do that. And so legal education is not just the substantive law. Legal education is developing to not just the critical skills that you will already be getting in a careless law degree as a critical law school, but that second level AI skills, so that you're not just using it as an output. You are using, or as we know it, cheating, using it as a tool being able to help people to brainstorming, planning, these kinds of things, and thinking about what you bring to it, that human empathy, that human judgment, that ethics, these sorts of things. Now, I bring this here, but I don't really want to go through this. This is just about why prompting in particular is important. But when you start looking at prompting and doing that and thinking about it in assessments and pilots that you may take part in during your legal education, that will all be explained to you. I'll hand back to Marie to start thinking about some of these questions that we need to think about in AI, in the legal profession, when you are law students, and start thinking about them now and the skills that future lawyers need in an AI powered world.
I nearly did that terrible thing of starting to talk without unmuting myself and caught myself just in the nick of time. Thank you so much, Lisa. So hopefully my colleague Laura, who is in the background here, will be able to put a poll up on our screen to get us started now. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Laura, for your efficiency and amazingness. So what I just want everybody to answer very quickly to get us going is this question. Would you trust a legal decision made entirely by an algorithm? Simply yes or no. And then what I want you to do, and I know that you can do this because the comments and the questions in the chat have been phenomenal, and I'm hoping that we can get through some of them. I want you to elaborate on that. Okay, so why or why not? So if you can make a comment in the chat or something like that, that would be fantastic, so that we can get a sense of where your head at is with that. So would you trust a legal decision made entirely by an algorithm? Either yes or no. Like, to put it in a different way, would you let ChatGPT decide a court case? Which is a bit more of a provocative way to put it, perhaps. No. Okay. So we've had about 2/3 of the room fill that in, and straight away we've just gone no. So if we're very clear that we're a no, why are we a no? So somebody here has said, I always recheck the chat's feedback because I have had it past backing up articles to legal arguments and link never existed. I can't tell you, and Lisa knows this, and I will not go into it, but I cannot bear how terrible it is at providing you with accurate sources. It makes stuff up, right? So it's really important that we check these kinds of things. And I've probably primed you already with giving you those examples of the fake cases, right? We know that this stuff isn't necessarily reliable where it is now. But, and this is an important but when we're thinking about the ethics of this stuff and how we're going to move forward for the legal profession, if we could guarantee its accuracy, would we still want to do it? Or would we still not want to do it? Sorry. Like somebody has just said here, AI is not perfect. Oh gosh, you're all commenting, and so I've lost it. There we are. AI is not perfect. Sam Altman, the executive for ChatGPT, is shocked by how so many people trust AI. So why should we trust AI for a court case? Only people who are not interested in the law would rely on AI for such things. Absolutely. But it's really interesting, and that's the reason why it grabbed my attention that you said AI is not perfect, right? Our judges are not perfect. That's why we have a system. That's why we have a system that allows for things like appeals and challenges and that kind of thing. People make mistakes. New evidence comes to light. There are lots of different ways in which we might challenge legal decisions, and one of those ways is that people are not perfect. And so some people might say, well, the AI is proving to be more reliable. Imagine we found a world in which the AI was being proved to be more reliable, right? Or just as reliable as people. Would we still be saying that we wouldn't hand over the legal decision making? And I suppose if I can put that in another way, what is it about people making decisions that we find important? Lisa, do you have any thoughts? You look so pensive.
I'm actually thinking a discussion I have with some of my students in that it's actually thinking about sort of juries and people often talk about jury trial, and in fact people defendants opt for jury trials thinking that juries will be fairer or they'll be more lenient and things like this. But I'm my mother, for example, I need to bring my mother into this. My mother, she very intelligent, really lovely, you'd love her if you met her kind of thing. She, for some reason, gets called for jury service all the time. Um, and she'll come and she'll say to me, and I'll be like, "Oh, how was it?" And she'd be like, "Oh, you could see it in his eyes." I'm like, "You made a decision based on the way somebody looked at you?" And she's like, "Oh no, Lisa, you could just see it in his eyes." And you think,
Mhm.
that impacted on her decision making, looking at who the defendant was. That wasn't something that was determined primarily on I've just realized this is taped. Let's hope my mother never watches this. But that whole thing is that
This it ties so nicely into a comment, though, that somebody has made, which is that there is something inherently humanistic about law, and that would be insufficiently met by AI. The lack of human context and emotion in a decision would provide either too harsh a judgment or not harsh enough. And I think that
exactly,
that is the thing that I was trying to get on there. There is something that we think, at least as a population, something about people. There's something about humanity that we want to harness in our legal system. And these are the kind of things that we are exploring at the moment in legal education and in the legal sector, and that we hope you join us to explore too, right? And so I'm conscious that we've got one more poll before we wrap up, but to just highlight some of these questions further still, um, these are the other kind of questions that we want to be thinking about and are thinking about. So if AI could write a legal memo faster than you, and this primes us a little bit for the question to come, what makes you valuable as a lawyer? What are we bringing to the table as people? And we've touched upon that a little bit now, but what are we bringing to the table as people that makes us unique and that makes us stand out from that generative AI? So very, very quickly, can we have you just answer this question and let us hear your thoughts. So, what skills do future lawyers need in an AI powered world? And I think this is stuff that we've been harnessing in the chat. So, hopefully, it
oh,
won't be.
I probably stopped it or something. Oh, sorry, that's me. I was trying to put it onto the poll thing so that it did it straight away, but I think that closed the poll. Right, there we go. We're back in now. Can people type?
While you're doing that, I'm just going to highlight some of these comments because they are really great. So, Lisa was telling us about how the generative AI actually works with its predictions. And so, somebody has said the information these algorithms use aren't completely factual. They are just rephrasing or remixing things that have already been posted, right? So, it's not it's dressed up in a different way, right? So somebody else has said that it lacks critical thinking skills and nuance. Maybe that's the kind of thing that we want to be thinking about then in terms of this question, particularly in a system which relies on common law. And that's a really important point that we don't have time, unfortunately, to go into. But the nature of the legal system can really differ.
Oh, there we go. It's
Um,
preparing. There you go.
Perfect.
This is really
How amazing that empathy has come up there. Now, as somebody who teaches on a legal professional practice course, that is not the kind of emotion that many people tie to lawyers, and so that's really interesting that that's come up as so strong. I agree. I think it's super important, but it's interesting that that's a really big one.
and that critical thinking and that ability to bring judgment and I like the use of the word perspective as well. It's perspective and compassion. These are all sorts of these different things that AI doesn't bring to the party, as it were. It is the AI is good at perhaps summarizing things. It is good at planning, structuring, these kinds of things. But when you want to see, when people are dealing with law, generally there are cases and there are hearings, be it civil or criminal, because we're at the edges of law. We're at the edges and of things being awful, or it's going to be awful for someone, or something criminal has happened, or and we're adjudicating as to whether a defendant should be held liable and to what extent. And so that ability to bring that compassion, empathy, critical thinking, perspective, hugely important, and is the sorts of skills that perhaps, as Marie says, isn't the sorts of skills that empathy and perspective and compassion and creativity isn't what people would 5 years ago have associated with the skills that a lawyer needs to have. And I think that's one of the things that AI has brought to it. It's one of the interesting things that I wanted to say was that it's quite interesting that nobody's put in there the ability to do sort of their own legal research, that ability to translate between tech and law, the ability to know how to find reliable sources beyond the AI. I mean, there's no reason why you would have put that in, but I think one of the things that I don't want us
Characters.
to, yeah, exactly. One of the things I don't want us to lose sight of is that just because we can use AI, and I'm a huge adopter of AI. This is an area I work in. I try out all different sorts of AIs and platforms and things, and push what you can do with them all the time in researching how we teach and what we want to do with it. But I want to make sure people never lose sight of the just because we can do it doesn't mean we ought to do it. There needs to be we need to still have that skill, that knowledge, that understanding that allows us to engage in the critical thinking, to develop beyond the AI. Yeah, so that was what I wanted to say. Marie, did you want to add anything more in there, or shall I move on?
We've literally got 2 minutes left, so I think that we just need to wrap up. What I would say is that there have been tens and tens of comments in the chat, and I'm sorry that we can't read them all out and engage with all of them, but please do take a moment before you leave to have a look through them all, because there's some really interesting thoughts and some really interesting people here, and it's fantastic that you have like really brought your ideas and yourselves to the session, which has been so interesting. And I think that Lisa has hit the nail on the head there, right? And I asked quite a provocative question that allowed us to go into the no, we couldn't possibly use AI in this way. But I think that we can equally make that into a more of a positive, right? Okay, so it's not that what we don't want to use it for, but also what we do want to use it for, because it is this really interesting, innovative tool that has come along that can help us in our practices, both everyday lives as well as in the legal profession. So we have put some resources on the screen for you here. There are just a small handful. There are so many things that you could be looking at. The Gandalf one is really fun. It's a game with how to be really good at prompting, right? And that's one of the things that we haven't touched on hugely today, which is you get out of AI as much as you put into AI. And one of the things that Lisa has become a real expert in is her prompt engineering. And she is fantastic at going, I want these very specific things here. And what you give to AI, you get back. And so really emphasizing on the us in that situation, and not denying or like transferring our intelligence in using artificial intelligence. This
And I think we're about to run out of time. So to thank you all for coming and
Yeah,
engaging today. It's a lot of fun for us. We will send these slides out, so you will have the links and the links on our slides as well. This is the end of our Summer of Law series, so I hope you've enjoyed them. And this will be posted on our website, so you can always listen to it again, and we will get those slides sent out to you. But thank you so much for the questions, and Marie and I'll go through them later. But you can always email us, engage with
somebody
us.
did ask about contacting Lisa actually. So just we are both on LinkedIn. You can search for us, Marie, Kerin, and Lisa Dickson. But you can also email us if you look us up on the Kent website, and we're really happy to continue the conversation offline.
Always, always about AI. I have many thoughts. But
Thank you
thank
all
you
so
all, and I hope
much.
you enjoy the rest of your summer. And if you're waiting for A-level results, very good luck. And we hope to see you in October.